In September 2025, Nepal erupted. A sudden ban on social media triggered the largest youth-led uprising the country had seen since the fall of the monarchy. Within days, streets were burned, dozens were killed, and an entrenched prime minister was forced to resign. What followed was something unprecedented: young Nepalese voting for their next leader on Discord. This is the story of how frustration, corruption, and a digital generation reshaped a nation in just one extraordinary week. But before we get into it, if you like my content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. So let's get into it. Nepal's transition from monarchy to republic in 2008 promised democracy, but instead delivered turbulence. Since then, the country has cycled through 14 governments in just 17 years, with none completing a full term. Political instability bred corruption, nepotism, and slow growth, forcing millions, especially the young, to seek jobs abroad. From Gen Z Nepalese, born in the late 1990s and early 2000s, disillusionment has been a way of life. They grew up watching governments collapse, promises evaporate, and elites entrench themselves while ordinary citizens struggled. The so-called Nepo kids, children of politicians flaunting luxury lifestyles on social media, became symbols of everything wrong with the system. By 2025, anger was simmering, and it would only take one spark to ignite the fire. That spark came in early September. Nearly half of Nepal's population uses social media, not just for entertainment, but as a lifeline for expression and activism. But the government wanted control. The Supreme Court had ordered global platforms to register locally, giving authorities power to monitor undesirable content. When companies refused, the Ministry of Communication made good on its threat. On September the 4th, 2025, 26 major platforms went dark overnight. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, X, WeChat, Snapchat, and more. Officials claimed it was about combating fake news and hate speech, but to Nepal's youth, the timing was telling. The blackout coincided with the rise of anti-corruption Nepo Kids campaign. To many, this wasn't about safety, it was about silencing dissent. The ban proved to be the breaking point. Within days, protests swept Kathmandu. On September 8th, thousands of students flooded the capital, waving flags and chanting urban social media, "Stop killing our voice, shut down corruption, not the internet." Their demands were clear: restore social media, hold leaders accountable, and create an independent anti-corruption watchdog. At first, the protests were peaceful, even symbolic. Some students did their homework on the street, but when riot police deployed tear gas, water cannons, and barricades, tensions exploded. By evening, clashes had turned deadly. At least 19 people were killed on the first day alone. Windows of Parliament were smashed, buildings were burned, and the Prime Minister's residence had been attacked. The protests spread nationwide, making September the 8th the bloodiest day in Nepal's modern history. Caught off guard, the government struck hard. Curfews were imposed, and, for the first time in years, the army was deployed to the city streets. But violence backfired. Images of bleeding students spread online through VPNs, fueling even greater outrage. By the end of the day, the Home Minister had resigned. Compensation was promised for the victims, and most crucially, the social media ban was lifted. But it was too late. The youth no longer wanted temporary fixes. They wanted change. On September the 9th, the defiant Prime Minister tried to appeal for calm, but protesters refused to back down. By midday, facing pressure from the streets and his own coalition, he resigned. The news sparked celebrations. Protesters painted "We won" on the Parliament's scorched walls. Yet the jubilation was tempered by grief. By week's end, 51 people had died and 1,300 injured, a staggering toll that underscored the cost of change. But Nepal's Gen Z movement wasn't finished. Lacking parties or formal leaders, they turned to the digital tools that had defined their protest. On Discord, A server titled Youth Against Corruption swelled to 130,000 members. There, they debated candidates for interim Prime Minister, figures seen as clean and untainted. The list included Kathmandu's mayor, reformist leaders, and the former Chief Justice. Through online polls on Discord, the former Chief Justice won in a landslide with over 7,700 votes. For the first time, a leader was chosen not by Parliament, not by backroom deals, but by a digital grassroots vote. On September the 12th, the President appointed Sushila as interim Prime Minister, the first woman to ever lead Nepal. Backed by protesters and reluctantly accepted by the political elites, she was sworn in with a mandate to stabilise the country, investigate corruption, and oversee new elections. For protesters, it was validation. Their uprising had toppled a leader and elevated a clean figurehead. For Nepal, it marked an unprecedented experiment in digital democracy. On the global stage, the world watched closely. The UN condemned the killings. Amnesty and Human Rights Watch slammed the use of live ammunition, and the US urged restraint and dialogue. Meanwhile, India and China, Nepal's powerful neighbours, welcomed Sushila's appointment quietly, eager for stability at their doorsteps. Digital rights groups worldwide called Nepal a cautionary tale. Internet shutdowns don't silence dissent, they inflame it. So what? For now, calm has returned, but Nepal is at a crossroads. Anti-corruption reform is now unavoidable. Gen Z has shown it can self-organise outside of traditional politics. The army has reasserted itself as a guarantor of stability, and the trauma of 51 lives lost will linger, fueling demands for accountability. Economically, the unrest hurt tourism and commerce, but if reforms take root, Nepal could emerge stronger, with the renewed trust and investment. Politically, one lesson is clear. The youth will not be ignored. As one activist said, if we stay silent, these leaders and their children will only continue to use the same corrupt system. We won't stop. In the span of 1 week, Nepal witnessed a social media blackout, its bloodiest protests in decades, the fall of a prime minister, and the rise of its first female leader, chosen in part through a Discord poll. It was a moment when frustration met opportunity, when a generation refused to stay silent, and it may be remembered not just as a turning point for Nepal, but as a sign of how digital age activism can topple governments and remake nations. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more intelligence reporting. Thank you for watching. See you!